This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of November 27th, 2023. And you're looking at me instead of just hearing my voice. Why? Because it's been recommended to me that I start doing this podcast on video instead of just audio. I've felt like I shouldn't do that largely because I felt like I couldn't do it with the quality level that I really wanted to do. I have been working with video one way or the other for close to 40 years. And I've always wanted to maintain a certain standard of quality with my videos, and I think that that's a good aspiration. I wanted always things to look professional. I wanted the audio to sound natural, good, good video quality, good audio quality. And when it comes to a podcast, I didn't feel like setting up an entire studio setup for just, a 5 to 10 minute podcast, because realistically, that would take me a little longer than I have when it comes to this whole thing. But then I started thinking, when I look at a lot of YouTube videos out there, what I see is a level of quality that is not what I would normally associate with, good. You see a lot of stuttering, you see bad focus, you see things that aren't working. People just kind of jump cut, and a jump cut is when you just kind of go from point to point. I'm going to do one right now. This is a jump cut where you see what happens is that I've just kind of cut a chunk out of the video, and it's my face just jumps a little bit, and that used to be considered total no-no. Well, as I went to watch all of these YouTube videos that I use for inspiration, I realized that the majority of them really are very poor quality. There are a couple of YouTubers out there. I looked at people like MKBHD, Marcus Brownlee, who is doing really good quality stuff, even though he's using consumer grade equipment. But for the most part, a lot of these YouTubers are just putting out stuff that looks like what you're looking at right now. The frame rate may not be what it needs to be, or the color quality may not be what it needs to be, or the whole thing just may be plain old blurry. And apparently that's okay. And I got around to thinking about quality of video versus the quality of the actual content. And is this really a bad thing? Is it really a bad thing that anybody can put out quality content that doesn't look like quality content? And is it even more like, okay, if you're putting out really polished looking content, does that mean people won't trust you as much? I think that's a real good question, because I tend to personally, when I think about it, gravitate toward a lot of these podcasts that are made by average people giving their opinion about a thing. They've used a thing and they've tried it, and this is what they think, and they want to put out something. These are folks who maybe have a couple hundred subscribers, not hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers. And these are the folks who come off to me as seeming really trustworthy. Why? Because they're not putting out a video with this huge amount of polish that looks like it was done by a corporation. And so I wondered, well, okay, maybe what I need to do is just put out the video that I put out, and you all kind of can be okay with that. And I'm curious. I really am curious to see if this experiment works. I am recording this podcast with just a plain old webcam. I'm still using the broadcast quality microphone that I use for these podcasts all the time. But when it comes to video, I think that the video quality is quite honestly very poor. And if I had the time and the inclination, I would want to be in a studio setting with a proper green screen, so this black thing, which is actually part of my chair, doesn't keep showing up. But I wonder if really that's the point. And there's a bigger discussion to be had here, because think about the recent actors and writers strikes. I have said over and over again that I think that while these were important things, and I think what the actors and writers were looking for was important, especially when it comes to AI, that just not having writers and actors around at this point is, you're running a risk of people just getting used to watching YouTubes that were made by regular people like me, instead of watching professional stuff, and the professional stuff becomes less interesting to them. And so is that a good thing? Well, maybe, maybe it is. Maybe it's good that we're seeing people who are just kind of passionate about what they're doing, talking about something, using the equipment the best possible way they can. Certainly, if you watch TikTok, nothing on TikTok looks professional ever. And that's actually just the style. That's the way that people do stuff. that's the way. And then so you have a whole generation who are growing up thinking that's the way it's done, and who are looking at really traditional scripted stuff with a certain amount of hesitation, with a critical eye, and thinking, okay, maybe this isn't authentic because it doesn't look like it was recorded by an average person at an average time. And this isn't new either. I think look back at some of the found footage movies from 10, 15 years ago, like Paranormal Activity, and that was interesting to people to say, okay, here's something that looks like it just kind of happened on a security camera. That makes it look more authentic. My hope is that what we'll see is that the quality of most people's video will improve over time, and at the same time that we will see there's a balance. There's going to be a time that you want to watch really good, high quality scripted stuff with really good production values. And then there will be a time that you just want to watch some guy with a background behind them just talking about stuff, kind of like me. And I think that the scripted stuff will evolve too. It will begin to look a little bit more authentic. And that doesn't necessarily mean it won't be produced as well, but it won't necessarily follow the same rules. There's an article on the Solid Signal blog which talks about the death of good lighting, and I'll put a link to it up here, and you can go to it and take a look for it yourself. And the idea being that really what we consider good lighting really is more about the technological limitations that were present 50 years ago that aren't present today. And even though I like to see things that are well lit, I agree there are times when you really want to see, somebody, if somebody's in the dark, you don't want to necessarily see them looking like they're just shot with blue light. It wants to look like it's in the dark. It looks more authentic that way. And so cinema can evolve in a way that shows more authenticity and still preserves a lot of quality. That's my thought for today anyway. This is going to be a relatively short podcast because now I'm going to go back and edit the stuff where I flubbed my lines a little bit and have to do this with video, which is going to take a little bit longer, which is cool. Do me a favor and let me know if this is something that you think is worth it, or if you find my ugly mug just too distracting when you're listening to this podcast. So as always, like, subscribe, and leave a comment anywhere you get this podcast. Makes me look good to my bosses, and it's especially important this week to let me know if this is an experiment that I should continue. If not, that's important to know too. As always, shop at solidsignal.com. They sponsor this podcast, and they let me do and say pretty much anything that I want, which is incredibly cool because they're incredibly cool people. If you really want that professional, high quality, high service touch, call the folks at Signal Connect. They're the full service arm of Solid Signal at 888-233-7563. That's 888-233-7563. That's about it for the Solid Signal podcast, and I will see you again next week.